you've taken in the last hour, or the way you've been breathing all day. We breathe 23,000 times per day, and we can't survive more than 2 minutes without it, yet we barely have to think about it. Not only is breathing critical for survival, but it's also been shown that technology doesn't always work. Okay, that the way that we breathe changes neural activity. So taking deep, slow breaths will activate the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest. Whereas taking shallow or quick breaths is going to activate the sympathetic, your fight or flight response. Breathing is one of many subconscious processes that are ongoing, allowing us to engage with each other and the world around us on a daily basis. I'm going to introduce you to a type of therapy that has the potential to revolutionize both the way we can understand and treat neurological disease, specifically when it comes to mental health and well-being. Is it as simple as breathing? I conducted a pilot study, it was quite small, interviewing 8 people who had experience with something called Conscious Connected Breathwork. In these sessions, you have a guide that directs you through a specific type of breath pattern where you are taking long, full inhales and relaxing the exhale without any pause between both of these, so it's a connected pattern. This can be conducted in either private or group settings, and there is an example shown here of a group watching what's done before they get into their own practice. This particular branch of breathwork has never been studied as far as I know, but the surrounding literature suggests that our body has the innate capacity to heal itself and relieve us from symptoms of mental health disorders. So Conscious Connected Breathwork has the potential to be a curative type treatment for conditions like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. These are conditions we do not currently have universally effective treatments for, let alone anything close to curative type therapy. Now, I considered looking into mindfulness or meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, eye movement therapy. However, as someone who engaged constantly with all of these modalities, someone who thrives off of personal growth, a year and a half ago, I faced a diagnosis of depression. I was consistent in therapy, disciplined in my practices, reflective of my growth, and yet I was exhausted and starting antidepressants. There were things that I just couldn't seem to change about myself no matter how many times I wrote out gratitudes. My experience with breathwork completely changed the game for me. I'm not the only one that is struggling with symptoms of mental health disorders. The prevalence of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing, with the diagnosis being made at younger and younger ages. The World Health Organization called depression the global leading cause of disease in 2018. This may be as much a reflection of our technology and diagnostics as it is a reflection of the pace of our modern world and how it impacts us. Regardless, from the work that I've done with youth in multiple communities, I've witnessed firsthand individuals struggling from symptoms of mental health disorders, as well as having to navigate the side effects that are incurred by trying to find the right pharmaceutical. And a lot of times, there isn't one that's effective. So we're all gonna catch our breath. Remember, you're still breathing. And we're gonna get into the fun stuff, the neuroscience behind it all. It's the fun stuff, though. It's the stuff I think is fun. So we're gonna address a few questions. First, we're gonna define the difference between the conscious and subconscious mind and where it is in the brain. We're gonna look at what a dysregulated nervous system is and how that relates to mental health. We're gonna look at how neuroplasticity can help and define what that is. We're gonna talk about how top-down treatments aren't effective and whether this type of breath work works, and if it does, how. First, we have an iceberg. Your conscious mind is everything that you are currently aware of in a given moment. We've all just discovered that breathing is not always in the conscious mind. One of the challenges that we face in the field of neuroscience is being able to pinpoint exactly where the conscious and subconscious mind are in the brain and the whole neural network. But we have a few good ideas. So overall, your conscious mind is in the green area, and most importantly, it's dominant in the prefrontal cortex at the interior or front of the brain, and on the exterior closest to your skull. The subconscious processes are a lot harder to pinpoint, but we know that subcortical networks that are shown in the blue and the red, your limbic system and your brainstem, facilitate a lot of subconscious processing. So what does this look like? While you're all sitting in presentations, your conscious mind is thinking, what are they talking about? Or what can I learn from this? While at all times, your subcortical areas, your subconscious mind, is looking for information to answer the questions, am I loved? Do I belong? And am I safe in this room right now? Other things that these subcortical areas are associated with are things like emotional reaction, stress response, and memory formation. 3 things we will come back to, as well as regulating the entire nervous system and therefore your body. So what happens when these regulatory structures are not functioning optimally? A dysregulated nervous system can be defined as one that is stuck in a trauma response, or you could say you've got a trauma stuck in your body. In order to understand how this is possible, we need to know 2 things. Number 1, the nervous system is our communication highway, both within our body and between the internal and external environment. So any kind of trauma or stress that you experience is first and foremost a trauma to this system. And number 2, the way that the nervous system interprets threat or safety. So whether it is perceived or real, and whether it's physical or social, your nervous system interprets threat in the exact same way. It kicks off that sympathetic nervous system, hits that fight or flight response to give you the biggest window you have at survival. And the way this looks, whether you have an avalanche starting behind you, or you're experiencing some serious FOMO, which is fear of missing out if you don't know, whether it is imminent threat on your life, or it's potential social rejection, your body responds in exactly the same way. Now, I've been using the word trauma to define a dysregulated nervous system, so we're going to define that. At the root of a trauma is simply a survival need that hasn't been met. So there are many ways that a system can become dysregulated. It doesn't have to be violence. It doesn't even have to appear as a severe trauma, but simply the experience of not having a need met, and then the repetition of that experience. If you think about if your body is being subjected to traumatic or stressful experiences, it's going to start figuring out that maybe this world is a threatening place. And so it's going to start to look for the worst in everything so that it can be prepared for the worst possible scenario. Can we see how that might lead to a diagnosis of anxiety or depression? Pretty easily. This is a dysregulated nervous system. We have hope in this situation though. The dysregulated system, the state is not fixed, and it's called neuroplasticity. So we're going to go back to that highway and imagine a long stretch of road and you have people lined up side by side. Each person represents a nerve cell, an individual nerve cell called a neuron. And the way that communication happens in this system is that the neurons, or the people, form relationships and talk to each other. Now, communication is only sent in one way, so it's like they're playing a big game of telephone, but they are way more accurate than we are at this game. And what we can do with neuroplasticity, what we found, is that if you increase the stimulus or decrease the stimulus as compared to normal, you can actually change the strength of the relationship or change them to have different relationships. So effectively, we can change how quickly and who the neurons are communicating with. That was a lot. Is everyone tracking with me? Oh my God. Okay, so breathe. And by show of hands, can you let me know if you have any vivid memories from ages 0 to 1? Okay, so that's nobody, in case you're wondering. How about ages 1 to 3? I'm expecting my sister. Yeah, okay, a few people. And what about ages 4 and 5? And keep your hand up. Okay, so it becomes way more common when you get to those ages. Keep this in mind. We're going to be using this as we go into the available treatments we have right now. So we've established the conscious and the subconscious, and that these dysregulations are going to happen in the subcortical networks in the subconscious mind, because that is the center where you have emotional reaction, stress response, and memory formation. 3 critical things for how we engage with stress or trauma and how we remember it. So 2 really popular ways to address these are through talk therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. These are trying to tap into conscious processes to get at the subconscious, to try to get back to those memories of when it happened, to make sense out of what beliefs or values we might have formed from that. If, as we all just realized, we have those traumas or stressors occurring in developmental stages where we don't have an explicit memory, you can put in as much effort and time as you want, and even with neuroplasticity, you might get some benefit, but it's going to take a lot of work. In these circumstances, pharmaceuticals can be really helpful because they can alleviate some pain. However, again, they are not effective for everyone. So can we directly tap into those subcortical networks to make a change? Beautiful thing, and a critical thing about breathing, is that it is an autonomic process governed by the subconscious mind that you don't have to think about, but also is voluntary. So everyone right now can change the way you're breathing, or if you're breathing, simply by drawing your attention to it. You can try it. Right. This means that we have a way to tap into the subconscious. Other autonomic functions are things like your heart rate, growth, hormone release, and digestion, which simply by drawing your attention to, I at least haven't figured out how to make any difference in those. So I conducted a pilot study. It was small. There's not a lot that I can claim from this. I interviewed 8 people, and mostly it was because before creating an experimental design with physiological measures of what is happening, I wanted to understand what the experience was for these individuals and whether it was at all similar to mine. What I have experienced through breathwork is that in other therapies, I've come up with these beautiful ideas and ways that I want to perceive myself and the world, but it felt overall like they stayed mere ideas, they stayed intellectual. Through breathwork, they pretty seamlessly came into my body and became integrated somehow, where my reactions to things changed without me having to effort so hard. It was like things changed from the inside out. Now overall, I found the same pattern in the people I interviewed. Every single person reported positive, notable benefits that were both short and long-term from the breath work. So what am I saying? Oh, one other thing I can't forget, it's very critical, is to understand that one of the things we're doing in this breath pattern is we're inducing an acute state of hyperventilation. Among many other things that it may be doing in the body, it is changing blood chemistry, which for the way that I am explaining what might be going on is that it's creating the optimal state for a lot of neural activity to happen, and therefore the stimulus that we need for neuroplastic change. So what I'm saying is that by focusing on our breath pattern, we can directly tap into subcortical networks where our dysregulation is happening, where we're storing those traumas and stresses. And because we're creating the perfect environment for neuroplastic change to occur, we can improve our state of mental health and well-being. The modern world today seems to be working against our bodies. It might just be that what we need to do to heal is to actually work with our body's innate abilities. And it might just be as simple as breathing. Thank you.
What does it look like in the actual exercises? Is it like a daily practice that you do for the rest of your life, or is it like, yeah, what does that look like?
So the question is, what does the breathwork practice look like? Is it every day? How do you incorporate it? So the folks that I interviewed, as well as my own experience, it was a weekly session with a guide. And what happened with, I think, 6 out of 8 people actually reported that over time, they felt less and less like they actually had to return and continue to do this because the effects would last longer and longer. So in the first session, you go away and have this amazing, like feeling incredible, like kind of like a high, feel a little bit weird in your body. And it would last for a couple days of you feeling really good and grounded. And then the more sessions you did, it would last more days, and then a week, and then 2 weeks, and then yeah, so I do think that it's not a one-hit wonder. You go in, go out, it's over. There are ways to, I've done training to get more understanding from the inside. So I've done a 1-week intensive where you can start to facilitate it for yourself and jump into it even for 10 or 20 minutes to help your body integrate what you have currently been experiencing. But yeah, it's breath. Another thing is accessibility. Pharmaceuticals can be so expensive. And other alternatives, there's so many incredible alternatives that take so much time and getting to appointments. And if it's kids, how are they going to get the access? So if it's breath, it's something we can tap into at any moment. Yeah.
I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but if you were to take this to the physiological testing phase of the study, how do you set up a control condition?
Very good question. So what I would like to do before even getting there is actually to do testing, because there's a lot of bias in this. The folks who were volunteering to do the interviews more than likely had positive results to report. So what I would like to do is first of all have a control group. Ideally it would be with folks with PTSD who have tried a lot of other modalities to be able to either give them just education, maybe cognitive behavioral therapy, and then this type of therapy to see what happens. But then otherwise, yeah, it's going to be through education and or potentially mindfulness practice, other types of modalities that are similar but not including that same breath pattern. Yeah.
Congratulations to Sorry.
Thank you.
My wife is a registered clinical counselor. What Karen does in her practice, she uses like the mindfulness-based stress reduction technique of incorporating a lot of breathing into practice with her clients. And I'm just wondering if that, when you talk about mindfulness, is that very, very different, the type of breathing from the technique that has helped you?
Than this one?
Yeah.
Yes. So I've done a lot of breath-based mindfulness practices, and I absolutely think that they're incredible. Because of neuroplasticity, those types of practices are absolutely important and can greatly improve our mental health, because when you have a repeated state of being, it can become a personality trait. So I absolutely wouldn't veer away from those. I still have different types of mindfulness practices, but this one, it's a lot less of a cognitive load, where it's a very specific type of breathing that, again, it induces hyperventilation. As type of hyperventilation, while the body, you're always lying down, so your body's actually at rest. So there's no energy demands on the body except for what might be happening internally. So yes, other types of breath practices are going to be tapping into that same ability to change neural activity, but this one is definitely different.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have time for more?
Yes, we have time for a few more.
Have you compared or contrast this to Kundalini yoga?
I have experience with Kundalini yoga. However, I haven't. This was the first that I'm aware of the research being done. It's kind of similar to holotropic breathwork, but this is different enough that I think it's significant to look at it specifically. What I think is different with that, I've also noticed amazing benefits with Kundalini. However, you're doing a lot of movement, so you're demanding energy from the body to be producing that movement. So if you're lying down and creating an environment that is rich with, so what you're doing is you're creating an environment rich with oxygen and increasing the potassium in your blood, which is going to affect neural firing and neural activity. So what I'm thinking is that because you're lying down and not demanding external energy from your skeletal muscles, that the energy can be focused inwards and allow neuroplastic change to shape in a more concentrated way, is what I would say this is doing, kind of a kickstart for getting people on track.
We have time for one last question if there's one.
There was a hand down here before.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, you say you induce sort of a
Hyperventilation, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So does that induce strong emotions? Because there are other currents or other approaches of working with breath and inducing hyperventilation, and they can induce really strong emotions. So is that the case here also? And
Yeah, so
how do you work with that?
Yeah, so the question is that does inducing hyperventilation also induce other emotional responses? And absolutely, this is why I highly recommend you do it with a guide first and foremost, because it's someone who can hold that space for you. Because essentially what you're doing is you're bringing your body back to that trauma state or that stress state, but then you're allowing your body to be relaxed and supported and have someone there to help you through it, to maybe bring you back if you're going too far. Every participant reported that they had emotional and or physical experiences during the session, but you're letting your body go back into that trauma and then actually allowing it to come down, which we usually don't have time for in our world, and allowing the body to realize it's safe and make a new connection that it's not actually such a threatening world. But yes, there's absolutely going to be emotional responses.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.